Let's look at some basic German longsword mechanics. I'm going to walk you through everything. You should be warmed up before starting this video because we're starting off right away with 40-second intervals and 20-second rests. We're going to start chill though, so you'll be fine. First thing that we're looking at is nice and easy. We're doing cuts from von Tag to long point, so basically to the center line. A couple of things, keep your pommel tucked in. Cut to long point, but definitely not beyond that target. And always lead with your sword and arms before passing with your feet. So this is an Oberhau, basically cut from above, descending cut. And as I mentioned, you want to keep your pommel tucked in because if it's sticking out, first of all, it's a telegraph. And secondly, your left arm, when it's pulled out, becomes a target, and we don't want that. Also here, we're cutting to the center line because if we miss, for example, and you stop in the center line, you are set up to do a thrust. You're also perfectly positioned to do a parry to any one of the quadrants very easily. So keep that in mind. We're going to be looking at the same principles again and again in all these rounds. That's your first round down, and we have 23 to go. You can track it up in the right corner. Next up, we're going to be doing the same cut from von Tag to long point, but on our non-dominant side. For me, that's my left side. So as you see, I'm starting with my dominant leg forward, my right leg forward, and I am passing with my left leg. I want to pass with the same leg on the side that I'm cutting on. This just makes the line longer. If I were to pass with the opposite leg, that may be viable in some cases, but I would be cutting my extension short. I want to get as much reach as possible. Notice how I'm also allowing my back leg on the pass to pivot so that my knee stays nicely aligned over my toe, keeping your knees safe from injury. So next we're looking at, again, Oberhau cuts, but we're cutting fully through into Alber, which is that low guard on the opposite side. Same as before, you want to extend your sword and arms fully before passing with your back foot. So why are we not cutting to the center line? Well, if you were to do actual target cutting, like on tatami or clay or something, if you stop at the center line, you will not cut through, so you want to also have the ability to cut fully through your target. You could also do this cut out of distance, kind of as a provocative hit, or maybe you miss your target and you want to have good form and make sure you land in that Alber guard. From there, you're set up to return into a thrust, a parry. There's a lot of things we can do from there. We're going to look at them in later rounds. So next we're going to be doing that same cut from our non-dominant side, left side for me. Principles are the same though. We're starting with a cross guard at the shoulder, keeping our shoulders down, keeping our pommel tucked in, and we're cutting fully through to Alber on the opposite side, only passing once our sword and arms have completed. Those are some Oberhau basics done. Okay, so next we're going to be going back to cutting to long point, cutting to the center line. And now we are parrying high on our non-dominant side, so the opposite side we're cutting from. Sink into that parry. So after I make that cut, and imagine that my opponent is cutting me on my left side, in order to have a good solid parry, I want to put my weight behind it and sink into it a little bit as I'm doing here. I'm kind of turning my body into it as well so I can, with a lot of force, catch their blade. Okay, we're staying on our dominant side now, cutting to the center line, high parry as before, but now we are going directly into a riposte. And we're riposting on our non-dominant side. So that is cut, parry, riposte. It might be a provocation. I just slapped my hip there. I'm showing you that you need to use your hips to generate force to make that riposte cut, because notice how I'm not actually doing any more passing steps. My feet are staying where they are. And from that parry, I'm using the power from my hips to do that non-dominant riposte cut. We don't want to be generating power from our arms. That's not where our power sits. It sits in our hips. Cutting into long point and immediately riposting with a thrust. So as I mentioned before, if you don't land your target on the first cut, you can still extend into a thrust. And you do that by allowing your tip to kind of pull you into the thrust, ensuring that your sword and your arms are leading. Only when your sword is extended do you pass with your back foot. In this case, it's my right foot. This is another good reason why you do not want to cut past the center line in this case. Just testing out if I were to go up into a ox from there. But I would prefer to stay in a nice direct thrust. Some like to twist up into an ox to kind of get a good bind against your opponent's sword. That's a taste issue, also kind of time and a place issue. Now we're looking at if we do cut to long point, high parry, and then the thrust. So we are imagining that we're cutting, that counter is coming from our opponent into our left side, so we have to make sure we get the parry first, and then we do the thrust. Maybe if you have kind of a thrust that turns into an ox, you could do both of these actions at once, but sometimes that cut is coming, you just need to parry it first and avoid the double. And then when you see that opening on their center line, go directly for the thrust. Don't hesitate. Notice how I'm doing that passing step with my right leg. And from there, I'm, after the parry, going into a lunge with the same leg. We're doing the same series again, working from our non-dominant side, left side from me. So starting off easy with cut to long point or the center line, and doing a high parry on our dominant side. Cut, parry. Notice here I'm kind of cutting, passing, and then landing only in that parry. That could be if you have to abandon your attack because you see that they are going for that counter immediately, or they're just trying to double you or whatever. My footwork is allowing me to make that transition from passing step to solid parry with my weight sunken into it. Again, and I'm still using my hips here to sink into that parry. Staying on our non-dominant side, we are progressing with a cut to long point, parry high, and a solid riposte on our dominant side. Once again, rather than doing another step, we are using our hips to generate force in that immediate riposte. There's a little bit of a longer rest in between because I had to reset the software I was using for timing my intervals. So Sorry about that, but at least you get a little bit longer to get a drink of water or whatever. So we're continuing with the same progression, cutting to long point, high parry, and then turning it into a thrust. Cut, parry, riposte. It can be a little tricky to thrust on that side, on your non-dominant side. At least it is for me. It's something that kind of gets easier with time. I have to force myself to drill this one because I don't really like using it, and especially in sparring, it's something you have to kind of actively allow yourself to try out. But getting that riposte and that thrust on that opposite side can be very powerful because it's unexpected. Returning to our dominant side, we're cutting all the way through, again, full cuts down to Alber, and then, as I'm figuring out here, resetting into Flug, or plow, as some of you are inclined to call it. And from there, we're basically we've missed our opponent, or we've done a provocative hit, they haven't responded to it, and we're just resetting into a nice guard that's easy to work from, so that we are not exposed, we're covered, and we're ready to kind of activate whenever we need to. You can, of course, stay into Alber if you feel like you're out of distance and you can work from there. But if you're getting closer, if you're in that kind of middle distance, you want to make sure that you're in a good guard. And I like Flug because it's both defensive and offensive at the same time. You're covered, you're threatening. It's easy to parry from there. I like working from it. And it seems like that's kind of what the meta favors in tournament fencing right now as well. So from here, we're doing the same thing, cutting through to Alber, resetting into Flug, and doing a quick riposte with a thrust. That's what Flug is good for, right? Cutting, resetting, and going into that thrust riposte. And, you can practice parrying that after blow if you'd like. Once again, always leading with the sword before stepping. I have passed with my dominant leg. From there, I'm going directly into a lunge, not passing again. Let's look at the same thing from our non-dominant side. Cutting through to Alber and resetting into Flug. As you can see in my Oberhau cut, I have a slight telegraph on my right shoulder. I kind of lift it a little bit. A good fencer will see this and kind of use it to alert them to when I'm going to make my attack. Something I need to work out. It's especially present when I'm cutting from my non-dominant side, from my left side, because I'm not used to cutting from there as much. So this is another good reason to film yourself drilling, so you can kind of detect these little telegraphs, the little imperfections that you can work on. So once again, we're cutting through to Alber, resetting into Flug, and doing that thrust riposte. Only passing once I have fully cut through, and using that same leg to extend into a little lunge. Remember to sink into the parry and use your hips. Okay, so from here, I'm doing something interesting. I'm cutting through to Alber for my dominant side, and I am cutting up again, immediate return cut with false edge. So I'm not rotating my blade, I'm cutting down with true edge and directly up again with false edge. So you could do a couple of things here. You could be beating the blade away. It's kind of a parry. Beat the blade away to open up their center line and do a counter from there. Or it could be that you've cut through to Alber and you see that they're cutting your high line and you need to transition back up into a quick parry. If I were to have cut to the center line there, it'd be much quicker for me into that high parry. Okay, so let's look at, we're doing the same thing here. We're cutting through, immediate return cut, and then we're cutting with false edge. Cutting up with false edge and then returning the cut with false edge, which means that you need to rotate your blade. Cutting up, rotate, and it's kind of a flick of your sword into the target. And if you haven't done this before, don't worry. The next thing we're going to look at is doing that false edge cut isolated on its own, if this is brand new to you. But for now, just practice cutting through to Alber, immediate return with false edge, and try to flick the tip in afterwards. I like a good false edge cut because it's unexpected and you can get funky angles in there. If you train your opponent that you're going to cut in Oberhau direct with true edge again and again, and then you switch it up and cut with false edge, you're sometimes getting past their parry or past where they're cutting, and you can get like nice little cuts to their forearm from there. Okay, so here I'm breaking it down. I am starting in Montag and I'm rotating the blade and kind of using my left hand to guide my pommel. I'm not gripping my pommel tight, to rotate the blade around so that the false edge is the one cutting in. So the edge that's basically facing my shoulder, my back, is the edge that's cutting my opponent. And you want to land it with just the tip of your sword. As you can see, my cross guard is slightly higher than my tip here. It also helps to kind of step off line a little bit. Okay, so we're doing the same progression, but on our non-dominant side. So starting with that cut through to Alber and an immediate return flick up with the short edge. Either you're beating their blade away or you are resetting into a high parry. So I'm starting with just a simple false edge cut before the longer combo. So trying it out on the other side. I'm pointing out here that it can be helpful to use a thumb grip. The downsides of using a thumb grip to start off with is that you may be signaling to your opponent what you're going to be doing. A lot of people who start out with a thumb grip, they hold their blade flat against their body, and that signals that you're going to be doing like a Zwerchhau or something, or a false edge cut like this. But if you want to use a thumb grip, try to kind of keep the cross guard like you normally would doing a normal Oberhau, so you kind of don't reveal what you're going to be doing. But if you want to start out with the normal grip and then transition into the thumb grip in the cut, that is kind of the most incognito way of doing it. Takes a little bit of finesse and like fine motor skills, and that's why we drill, right? A little bit of a longer break again. Okay, so let's do the whole combo now. So we're cutting through to Alber, flicking the blade up again, and then rotating into the false edge cut. So it's true edge, false edge, false edge. Non-dominant side. I'm trying out there what it would look like if I were not to take another passing step. And if you're close, you know, to your opponent at that point, it may not be necessary to take a passing step, and you just use your hips to rotate your body to get the blade in. Otherwise, if you need to take a passing step, take a passing step. I would argue here that I'm actually kind of overturning my body a little bit. And again, this is me working on the side I'm not used to working on, but you don't need to turn your hips as much as I was doing there. Only 3 rounds left. Let's take a look at Zwerchhau, otherwise known as the helicopter cut. We're starting off with looking at the hip mechanics. So as I mentioned before, power is not generated from your arms for the most part, but it comes from your hips. You want to keep your knees aligned over your toes while you do this so that you're not hurting your knees. If you keep your feet kind of glued and you rotate your hips, you're going to hurt your knees in time. But you're basically kind of snapping your hips in one direction or another to generate force. And yeah, make sure you do both sides, so have both feet forward here. And this looks silly, but trust me, you need to get these mechanics down. Okay, so let's take those mechanics that we just practiced and add the sword. We're going into ox guard, and we are basically rotating the sword horizontally, keeping the blade perpendicular to the ground and rotating the tip fully to the center or close to the center each time we cut around, right? So our blade is kind of staying at the same height. Our cross guard is covering our arms, and we're making sure that that edge stays aligned for the full circular cut we're doing around. And once again, I'm using my hips, rotating my knee to stay aligned with my toes, keeping my shoulders down, and keeping our head covered. And hopefully you did both sides, so both legs forward in that. Okay, so now we're doing a Zwerchhau combo. So we're cutting high, high, low, low. So I'm using my pommel as a lever to drop my tip down, cutting at a lower target. So imagine you're cutting head, head with those first 2 high cuts, and then you're cutting low, low. This can be to their arms, it can be to their torso, depending on their height and kind of what they're doing as well. And this can be good as well if you've conditioned them that you're doing those high Zwerchhaus and you come in and you're cutting Zwer, 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 and then you switch it up and cut low. They're probably not prepped to transition their parry to cover that low line. So it's a good way to throw them off. Okay, that was it. Thank you.